G'day folks, Ronnie Dale, Four Wheeling Australia. Four-wheel drive versus all-wheel drive. What is the actual difference? So you guys understand and you don't buy the incorrect vehicle, and also you can shut your mate up who keeps saying that all-wheel drive is the same as four-wheel drive, because it's not. It is so different. Let's get into that. The systems we are going to talk about: part-time four-wheel drive, full-time four-wheel drive, and all-wheel drive. The one that we don't want for off-roading and four-wheeling and overlanding. All that cool stuff that we go out and do so we can get to all these awesome places. I'm going to simplify and generalize everything so it makes total sense. You have your part-time four-wheel drive as basic four-wheel drive, and one of the most reliable systems of four-wheel drive as well, and one of the cheaper ones to repair as opposed to full-time four-wheel drive, which we'll get to later. G'day guys, and welcome to the studio. We are going to jump backwards and forwards, so don't worry, you'll see Bush Ronnie very soon again. Part-time four-wheel drive. This is the first thing we're going to explain before we get to all-wheel drive, and then finally we're going to explain full-time four-wheel drive, because that's a bit of a system of both of part-time and all-wheel drive. Just so you can understand the fundamentals of a four-wheel drive, this is the engine, this is the transmission, also known as gearbox, and this is a transfer case. Transfer case is where all the magic happens. You have two high, just two-wheel drive, sending power to the rear, that's it, that's all we're doing. Or you get to your destination, like say the beach or state forest you want to drive through and have some fun on some tracks, then you go to four high. And then when you need to, you go to four low. In the transfer case, we have a couple of different mechanisms. One which allows us to remain in two-wheel high, which means it only sends power to the rear, nothing goes to the front. But what if we want to put it in four-wheel drive high? Well, we move the lever and this locks a plate in, or another cogwheel in, which means that it now sends drive to the front and to the rear. So in four-wheel drive high, you are essentially splitting your power and torque 50 to the front, 50 to the rear. When you're in two-wheel drive, you are only sending power to the rear, that is it. So the rear axle gets 100% of the power, but now you're in four-wheel drive. So in a perfect world, keep that in mind because it varies a bit. In a perfect world where your vehicle's flat and the weight is evenly distributed and you're driving in a straight line and you got it in four-wheel drive, every single wheel will have 25% power and torque. But this can vary a bit because the vehicle moves around. And there's a few other things that change it, but we'll get to that. There's another thing in this transfer case which allows us to get four-wheel drive low, and this is essential for a lot of four-wheel driving. And keep that in mind. Transfer case, four-wheel drive low and four-wheel drive high. Those are the things we need to keep in mind during this whole discussion. So just to recap really quick, when you're driving your part-time four-wheel drive on the highway, you should be in two high. You're driving around, 100% of the power is sent to the rear. You now got to your destination, you put it into four-wheel drive, whether it's high or low, you've locked drive, you've got 50% front, you've got 50% rear. So when you're on a flat surface going in a straight line, you got essentially 25% power and torque to each wheel. But if you should lift a front wheel off the ground, power and torque, or power and force, will go for the path of least resistance. It'll go towards that wheel that is not contacting the ground. What if a wheel lifts the ground? Let's simulate that. What if we have a dirt patch, like a real slippery mud patch or a hole where your wheel drops down and it's not touching the ground? These three are still touching the ground, so it's not so much of a problem because we are in four-wheel drive, meaning these two front wheels are still going to move forward and pull us out. This wheel here, however, will only have as much torque and force as it requires to spin the loose one. Stay with me here. But what happens if a front wheel is also at the same time in the same situation? Let's put an opposing hole over here. This is a quite common occurrence on some tracks that you may encounter with loose sort of dirt going up a hill. There could be two holes opposing to your wheel because that's where people are spinning the wheels. Where there's least traction, power and torque will go towards that wheel and it will force it to spin more. We have two opposing wheels off the ground. If you have momentum, it's not too much of a problem. Yes, these two wheels will spin a bit, but you'll pull through, you'll make it. But if you don't have momentum, however, you are a sitting duck because you're not moving anywhere. These two wheels will just sit there and spin. But what about these two wheels? They're on the ground. Why aren't they pulling you out? Well, the way the physics works in this situation is whatever this requires to spin, which isn't that much power and torque, is all that this wheel will receive, and this wheel will receive, but it's not enough to move your vehicle. But that's where LSD comes in handy. So most basic vehicles that are part-time four-wheel drives have an LSD, limited slip differential, in the rear. This allows it to catch on every now and then on the wheel that's still on the ground. It's like a temporary lock. It's like, you know, kind of like a shock system. It's like bang, goes in, goes in, goes in. And this can get you out of trouble most of the time. Some vehicles it's better. As long as you only have one wheel off the ground, you're okay. As long as you have some momentum, you're okay. But there is a way to improve this and fix this, and we'll get to that at the end of the video. But this is a four-wheel drive, part-time variation. All-wheel drive, meaning all four wheels have drive. But is it a four-wheel drive? No, it's not. Let's get to that now. So I call them wannabe 4x4. So sorry if I've upset any all-wheel drive owners. We have the engine, we have the transmission, but in this case we do not have a transfer case. We have a center diff, which allows drive and power to go up and down, you know, to the front diff and the rear diff. So we have three diffs in fact. An all-wheel drive, you cannot lock 50% of power to the front and the rear. An all-wheel drive, mainly in modern vehicles, rely on computers, sophisticated driving computers. They sense where the power is needed. The thing is, with an all-wheel drive vehicle, they're not designed for off-road. So when you're on the road, it wants to keep you safe. So if you're driving on the wet roads or on gravel roads and you're starting to slide out, your vehicle will try its best to keep you safe. Assist by sending power and brakes to where it's needed to keep your vehicle on the road to keep it stable. This system, however, off-road is not good. Any speed lower than 30 kilometers per hour in an all-wheel drive vehicle renders the bloody things useless. They are not good off-road. The minute you have to stop and then take off, you're in trouble, especially on soft sand. I know some people are going to argue with me that I've had an all-wheel drive vehicle for so many years and I've been going here, there and everywhere. Yes, if you have really good driver skill and you understand your vehicle, you can get away with this in a lot of places, but there are some places you're not going to get through in an all-wheel drive vehicle. I don't care who you are, you're not going to get through in an all-wheel drive vehicle. All-wheel drive vehicles to the main population are useless when it comes to off-roading. Now I understand a lot of these systems are all different, okay? But generalizing here, remember when we spoke about two wheels here were in mud and what would happen? All it takes for this system to fail is one wheel. One wheel starts spinning. And it's not just that, it's also the sophisticated systems that these vehicles are running. So they're great for gravel roads and great for on-road. So they can send braking and more power to the front or the rear of the vehicle, depending on what happens with the surface, whatever the vehicle is sensing. Are you sliding out? What are you doing? It's going to try and correct you as well as it can, which is great for roads and gravel roads. But when you're on soft sand beaches especially, that's when this system will fail. For example, when you're on soft sand, it will then sense that this corner is now spinning too much, that corner is spinning too much. It will apply jarring brakes and jarring power to other corners of the vehicle, and you'll end up in a standstill and you'll sink your vehicle into the sand and you'll be bogged. And then try and get out of a bog in all-wheel drive, good luck to you. It's not going to happen. You're going to need someone in a four-wheel drive to help you out, or you'll be digging for a very long time and you'll be filling those holes with all kinds of stuff to get traction. All-wheel drive vehicles are not meant for off-roading. They are meant for the roads. Also, with an all-wheel drive vehicle, if you put one of those on a hoist and you compare it to a four-wheel drive vehicle, all the components underneath are way more robust and stronger and bigger and heavier on a four-wheel drive vehicle. On an all-wheel drive vehicle, it's not meant for tough stuff. It's all flimsy stuff because it doesn't need to be strong. It's on the highway, it's on the gravel road. It's perfect for that. It doesn't need to be super heavy and super strong as opposed to a four-wheel drive vehicle. If you put this thing on a hoist and you look underneath it, it is all heavy metal. If you put a Nissan Patrol on a hoist, it's even bigger. Nissan Patrols have really strong differentials and strong drive shafts and just strong everything when it comes to driveline. You compare that to an all-wheel drive vehicle, it's like comparing a stick to a trunk. You now understand the principle of all-wheel drive vehicles, and that's going to help me explain to you the full-time four-wheel drive. A full-time four-wheel drive, when it's just in its standard mode on the highway, it is essentially an all-wheel drive vehicle. So you are getting the best of both worlds here, because when you go to off-road, you can select with the lever or the dial or the button, you can select to lock the center diff and go to four-wheel drive. This system consists of both the part-time system and the all-wheel drive system, both sort of combined. And that makes this the best of both worlds, so to speak. So we have the engine, we have the transmission, or gearbox, going to the transfer case. Now, the difference here is we also have a center diff as well as a transfer case. And we've got a front diff, we've got a rear diff. So as we're driving around, normally we are driving in all-wheel drive on a full-time four-wheel drive. So all-wheel drive. This is great because you've got maximum traction on highways and gravel roads, and in really mild off-road situations, you can probably get away with all-wheel drive. But when you want to do proper four-wheel driving, and you're on the beach, you're on some soft sand, you're on some technical stuff, you're in an environment where you actually need four-wheel drive, which is most of the places that we go to, what you do is you lock your center diff. When you lock the center diff, a little illumination on your dashboard is going to come up and it's going to tell you we are now locked and we are in four-wheel drive. Let's go and have some fun. That's what that means. You are now disabling the sophisticated computer sending different drives to all the different wheels. You are now turning it into a proper four-wheel drive. In some vehicles, you'll still have some sophisticated system that can still help you out, but you are still in four-wheel drive. You're still locked to the front, you're still locked to the rear. That is full-time four-wheel drive. So when you're not in four-wheel drive, you're in all-wheel drive. Best of both worlds. Not a bad thing to have. Safe on the road and safe off-road. With the added transfer case, you also have the options of 4 high and the lower gear ratio 4 low in most full-time four-wheel drive systems. Now there will be some around that don't have low range. We now know the main difference, but there's a few more things I'd like to point out. Most part-time four-wheel drives you are going to find in utes, single cab and dual cab utes, and like your lower end versions of some wagons and other four-wheel drive vehicles. When it comes to the upper class sort of wagons, they're going to have more of the full-time four-wheel drive systems because they got more safety features. Full-time four-wheel drive is a safety feature. It's like all-wheel drive. You can get a two-wheel drive version of the same car that you can get an all-wheel drive version of. The all-wheel drive version costs way more and they're safer for on-road. It's the same with four-wheel drives. There's some Hiluxes you can get that are two-wheel drive and there's some Hiluxes you can get that are part-time four-wheel drive. And the price difference is quite a bit sometimes. Now that you know all this information, and you know that all-wheel drive vehicles are safer on wet roads and they're safer on gravel roads. This is why when you have a part-time four-wheel drive, you are meant to put it in four-wheel drive when you're on a gravel road. And a lot of people even use four-wheel drive on wet roads. And that is because it improves the whole vehicle. The whole reason why we don't drive with four-wheel drive engaged on the highway is the fact that you're going to get bind up.
Driving on high traction surfaces like the pavement or highways in two-wheel drive and all-wheel drive is okay. And this is because we have open differentials.
Tarmac is an issue when you put it into 4 high, 4 low in either of these two systems. What's happening is when you are taking a turn, the inside wheels rotate less and travel a shorter distance than the outside does. As you can see here on my beautiful rainbow drawing, you can see these lines are way longer, the outside wheels.
As mentioned earlier, high traction surfaces when turning in two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive is fine because your differential is open. Power can vary between front and rear, but in four-wheel drive or when you're locked at center diff, the power cannot vary and this will cause problems.
You're going to get tension on two ends of your drive shafts or axles, and then something's going to give, because there's more drive on this end than there is on the other end, because things can't slip, things can't move, things can't budge, you're winding everything up. And bind up is when this wheel doesn't want to travel as far as this wheel, but this wheel is now trying to skip, and all of a sudden you're starting to get all these stresses lining up inside your drivetrain. Your drivetrain being the gearbox, the transfer case, the axle, the differentials, and the drive shafts. All these stresses will start binding up, and then bang. So that is why we do not use four-wheel drive on the highway. How to improve your four-wheel drive? You can do this to a part-time four-wheel drive or a full-time four-wheel drive by doing this simple method. And this simple method is installing diff lockers to your vehicle. Torque and force and power wants to take the path of least resistance. But when you are locking it, it is now forced to go towards the one with most resistance. Both wheels will rotate at the same rate, but more force is applied to that side because that's the only way it can move. So essentially you're flipping physics here. We have the part-time system in front of us to explain how to improve your four-wheel drive system. And we've already touched on lockers. And that was the center diff lock. Remember how we had to lock the center to have true four-wheel drive? Well, essentially, that's what this transfer case is doing. It's locking drive to the front and to the rear. So we now have equal amounts of force going both ways. Like these two prop shafts have to spin at equal rates. But it doesn't stop there. So what is actually happening here is, remember how I said in a perfect world, if the vehicle is flat on the ground and the weight distribution is completely even, each wheel will have 25% torque and power. But in real world terms, that's not the case. If you are going up a hill in four-wheel drive, most of your torque and power is now applied to the rear because the front doesn't need that much to move, to keep moving. And that is where things get really interesting when you add diff lockers to the mix. In an open diff, force and power wants to take the path of least resistance. But when you lock that differential, the front or the rear, you're now locking it. It is now forced to go and send a lot of power to that wheel that's got traction to move you on. This vehicle is stranded. It's trying to go uphill. We have a patch here where there's not enough traction for this wheel, and we have the front wheel with not enough traction as well. These two are just spinning, they're just kicking dirt, or they're not touching the ground. Let's, at a standstill, lock our diff lockers. We've locked the rear, we've locked the front, we are in four-wheel drive already, and we go to take off, and voila, we're out. Amazing. How cool is that? Both these wheels will rotate at the same rate now. So essentially, you've got two axles. One has got resistance, the other is just spinning because there's nothing happening. It's too easy for it to spin. And that's where all your power and torque is escaping. It's escaping through this one. So what is actually happening is, yes, this one here is getting power and torque, but it's only getting the same amount as this one is getting because that's where it's escaping. But if you lock it, now we're locked. Now the wheel that's on the ground pulls and takes all the torque that's needed. So now they have to rotate. They cannot rotate at different rates because they are locked. It's like you've welded the two axles together and now you're moving. So what's happening now is you are essentially having a hero wheel. Hero wheel number one. This has all the weights. This has all the resistance, most of it. And it's the rear wheel because you're going uphill. This wheel is now receiving 75% of all your power, all your torque, and it's getting you out of that hole. This one here only has about 15. I'm just coming up with numbers here just so you understand the difference, because that wheel is up here, all the weight's on the back, so this wheel's working harder, it needs more. And that's the cool thing about lockers. You're locking the drive, so the force and power and torque is forced to go to where it's needed, and that's what's so cool about lockers. Another example, you have been stuck in mud with two opposing wheels. Bada bing, bada boom. You've now locked the front and you've locked the rear, and you are in four-wheel drive already, of course. This wheel is receiving 10% torque and force, This one here is only receiving 7% because it's got far less traction than this one. But again, there's more weight on the rear of the vehicle, so this is your hero wheel. This one is mainly pulling you out. The front wheel is doing a lot of work as well, and that's got 35% torque to it. So your 100% of all your power is split, and you will always have a hero wheel, and that's what I'm going to call it. I don't think anyone else has called it like this, but the hero wheel. If you allow me to dive into it a bit more about just solely on lockers, I will, but I can't do it too much here because this is full drive versus all-wheel drive. If you look for a four-wheel drive vehicle that has high range and low range, you are on a good thing. Not all four-wheel drives have low range, and no all-wheel drive has low range. They just don't have it. They don't have that system. So there you go, guys. If you're looking for a vehicle to go off-roading or four-wheeling or overlanding, and you need four-wheel drive, which you will need, look for something that's got 4 high and 4 low, and choose either between part-time four-wheel drive or full-time four-wheel drive. Stay away from all-wheel drives. They are useless for off-road. You're going to regret it. Don't do it. You might as well get a two-wheel drive, because an all-wheel drive vehicle on rough terrain on the beach is a glorified two-wheel drive vehicle. A two-wheel drive vehicle is almost going to get you just as far. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next video.